Welcome back to another edition of Between Two FARS. I'm Warneke Miller here with the amazing Robert Tepfer, and we're going to start a new series today talking about the importance of inspection and acceptance under the FAR. And there's a lot to go into, and we can get ourselves into several quandaries if we don't know what we're doing. So this is an important series for the administration of your contract. Bob, what would you like to say as a way of introducing everybody to the concept of inspection and acceptance?
I guess to begin with, I would speak to authority and the fact that the inspector is really going to be binding the United States to the extent they act within the scope of their authority. That individual is put in that position by the contracting officer. The contracting officer may have an MBA and have absolutely no technical understanding of the in-depth aspects of what they contracted for, and will be dependent upon field engineers and inspectors throughout the contract administration. This becomes a very important thing because the inspector is the individual who decides whether or not the contract has actually been complied with, that whether or not the contractor has done their job. And the contracting officer has to understand that having put that individual in that position, that they're bound by the actions of that individual. They are an authorized representative of the United States, and they have contractual authority. Surely the contracting officer has some knowledge as to what they're buying, but they won't necessarily be able to do an inspection when they'll have to depend on it. And so the contractor is put in a position of having to depend on what the inspector says, and the inspector will have to examine it, and they have to make certain, the inspector, that they're complying with the standard which is set out in the contract. And that becomes kind of a critical issue that we'll go into at various points because of the issue of non-conforming supplies of goods and what are the rights of the parties with regard to those things. Now, 46407 speaks to a lot of different procedures and processes and kind of tries to lay out a little bit of what to anticipate. It's not a contractual clause, but it kind of tells you what is going to take place and how it's going to operate. To some extent, it codifies a little bit of the law from the case law, and it's important to read it, be familiar with it, and understand what's going to take place. And the inspector should be aware of this as well, since they're going to obligate the United States with regard to their actions. Now,
it's a pretty detailed and extensive FAR provision, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. And it gives a lot of guidance to the contracting officer, to the inspector, and so that they know how it works. And contractors have an opportunity to read it as well, and they should. But it's not the particular clauses that are that kick in. Those are what was contractually agreed to. Now, I'm going to speak about 52246 generally, but you need to understand that the rights of the parties and what's going to take place pursuant to the contract can vary based upon the type of the contract. Take a look at that. See, there's 26 different contractual provisions that come out of this, which speak to what the rights of the parties are, but they vary. In fact, it can even be more than this because based upon specific aspects of the work that's taking place, the parties could decide what constitutes a valid inspection and put that in the contract. That's unusual, but it can occur. And it's important to note that the standards are going to be set out in the contract and separately, but these are the provisions that take place. And if someone inadvertently, through their method of inspection, elevates the standards, that can get to be very difficult and can serve as a basis for a claim. The thing that's very interesting to me that I've always felt, it doesn't matter if you're doing aerospace or sidewalks and runways. A lot of times folks think that what could be the big deal with sidewalks? We all know what they are. Runways are kind of, pavement, big deal. And the answer is it can be extremely complicated. You can have a variety of different issues. I've done a lot of runway litigation. You have maybe 3 points that a giant aircraft is sitting on, and if it begins to deteriorate, you end up with $300,000 engines effectively bringing in this spot. So never assume that the work is something that you as a contracting officer, have a comprehensive knowledge of. Talk to the inspector, get to know what they're looking for. You should be doing that when you write the contract so that they have an entitlement to look for things that the contractor was contractually obligated to put there. So it all has to fit together from the beginning until the end. And if you do it properly, there shouldn't be any surprises. You shouldn't have a contracting inspector putting in standards that aren't spelled out because everybody knows that's what you got to have.
Well said, Bob. All right, so remember, you need to have the correct clauses. You need to work with the right people to get the correct clauses in. And you need your inspectors working with your contracting officers so that everybody understands what standards are in play when you're looking to inspect and accept deliveries under the contract. In our next episode, we're going to be talking about the risks of over-inspection or under-inspection. What happens when you don't follow the letter of your contract? I know you're as excited as I am to go into this next thing, so join us again between two FARS.